Hey everyone, welcome back to K-Korner, the channel where we dive into the wild world of entitled people and their unbelievable stories. Hope you enjoy it, and without further ado, let's go. A couple of things about me that made it really difficult to have a food thief. I have a lot of food allergies, so I can't just get lunch at the cafeteria or at a nearby restaurant. I have a new baby whom I'm breastfeeding, and I pump for when I'm at work. You know how hungry pregnant people are. Yeah, the caloric requirement for breastfeeding is 100 to 200 calories higher. I am always hungry. Because I have a new baby, half the time I don't manage to show up at work with lunch. I either run out of time to pack one, or if I do remember, I leave it on the counter. My solution to all of this was to leave lots of non-perishable snacks in my office. And also a lot of candy, because I also have a 3-year-old, and therefore work is the only place I can shovel Skittles into my mouth without a little hand extending into my field of vision, and a little voice saying, "Please?" Snacks that were specifically free of my allergens, some of which were specialty foods because of this. The type of specialty food that just doesn't taste as good as food that contains the allergen, and also costs twice as much. Because I'm not getting a lot of sleep right now, I deserve nice things. So because I'm not getting a lot of sleep right now, when I first came back from maternity leave, assembled my snack hoard, and started having things go missing, I genuinely thought I was just losing my mind. Boxes of candy were running out faster than I thought I was eating them. I'd come in the morning, and things wouldn't be where I'd left them. At one point, I brought a bag of chips to work, folded the rim of the bag down so I wasn't plunging my arm elbow deep into a grease pit, and then put a bag clip on it when I went home. When I came in the next morning, the bag was unrolled and re-clipped. I went, "Wow, I must be more tired than I thought," rolled the bag back down, and the next morning it was unrolled again. Just little things like that, almost every day, made me go, "Wow, the post-baby brain is worse than I thought." And then I got the flu. I got the flu and was out for a whole week. Left behind at the office was an almost full box of Enjoy Life cookies, which are not enjoyable but are free of all major allergens, and are also $5 a box for like 12 sad little sand pies with some cinnamon on top. I ate one row of these cookies, and then I was out of the office for a week. For 1 week I was not eating any of my snack hoard, but someone else was. Because I came back to work, opened my box of cookies and found one. There was one single, solitary cookie left, and on further examination, the one box of candy that had been opened was nowhere to be found. And on top of that, the thief had done me the courtesy of opening a new box for me, except that they actually followed the push here to open instructions, instead of just ripping one end of the box open like I do, which they should well know at this point because by this time, they'd been stealing from me for 2 months. The combination of these two things, the sheer audacity it takes to open a new box so you can continue stealing from someone, on top of the consumption of almost a whole box of specialty cookies that aren't even good, enraged me enough that, after going to my boss and getting some vague promises about checking if the security cameras in my wing of the building are functional or not, I went straight to Amazon and ordered myself a nanny cam. Not for my baby, for my snack hoard. Conveniently, it arrived the day before Valentine's Day. I set it up on top of a file cabinet looking down at my desk. On the desk I laid out a fantastic spread of bait snacks. I got all my thief's favorites, and then I took it one step further. I bought myself a Valentine heart, broke the seal to make it more inviting, and left it out on my desk. The next morning, I came into some very obvious snack carnage. My thief had slowly been getting more brazen. Again, who opens a new box of something and opens it differently than the person they are stealing from? But this was just on another level. Individually wrapped things had been dumped out of their boxes, bits of packaging had been thrown away, and, yup, they'd eaten some of the Valentine candy. For shame, office thief, don't you know that's from someone who loves me? I played back the video. All was quiet throughout most of the evening, and I was just watching the shadows lengthen as the sun slowly set through the hallway window. And then, shortly before midnight, the night janitor arrived and went right ahead and took a 12-minute break in my office, sitting in my chair, eating my food. I started taking screenshots. I got him shoveling candy into his mouth with full palm-to-lips intensity, pouring things out onto the desk to pick his favorite flavors, not even bothering to put them back where he found them. And yes, eating my Valentine's candy. Screenshots went directly to my boss in an email. I went directly to my boss's door to hover and grin and ask if he'd read my email. And I got assurances of a strongly worded email to the cleaning company and the barring of this particular employee from our place of business. I was also tactfully asked to please take my unauthorized spy camera home, which I did. I thought this was over until the girl who works the concession stand dropped by to thank me. Apparently, the food thief would start his shift just as she was closing down for the night and would try to get free coffee in that creepy guy way. And then one of the reception staff came by with the same sentiments. I'd never met the guy face to face, but apparently as a woman it was not a fun experience to have. I'd shown my screenshots to a few coworkers, whose eating user X's food had become office gossip by this point, and word had spread fast. I worked an earlier shift, so I didn't recognize him, but people whose shifts overlapped with his did. I hadn't told my husband about what I'd done because, when I came home raging about the blatant theft that had gone on while I'd had the flu, his only response had been, "You really shouldn't be leaving food at work then." But when I came home with the nanny cam and explained where and why I'd gotten it, his reaction surprised me. "You know, I think this is the first time I've seen you stand up for yourself. I'm proud of you." You know what, Reddit? I'm proud of myself too. I never thought that a night out with my buddies would turn into one of the most embarrassing moments of my life. It all started when we walked into a bar downtown. It was a Friday night, and the place was packed with people drinking, laughing, and having a good time. I'm a military officer, and I had just returned from my deployment in Afghanistan. My buddies thought it would be a good idea to take me out and celebrate my return. I was excited to be back and looking forward to having a few drinks with my friends. We walked up to the bar, and I ordered a round of drinks for all of us. As we were waiting for our drinks, a group of women walked up to us. They were loud, obnoxious, and clearly intoxicated. They started talking to us, and I quickly realized that they were a bunch of Karens. One of them started hitting on me, and when she felt that I wasn't interested and kept distancing myself from her, it got ugly. She pointed to me and said, "Look at this guy, he thinks he's so tough because he's in the military." She must have heard my friends asking me earlier about the time I spent on my deployment in Afghanistan and knew that I'm in the military. I didn't want any trouble, so I tried to ignore them and turned around to face the bar, but the Karens wouldn't let it go. They kept insulting me and making fun of me. One of them said, "What's the matter, soldier? Can't handle a little criticism?" I was getting angry, but I didn't want to cause a scene. I turned around and said, "Look, I don't want any trouble. Let's just enjoy our night, okay?" But the Karens wouldn't back down. One of them even tried to grab my hat off my head. That's when I had enough. I stood up and faced them, towering over them with my 6'3" frame. "Listen, ladies, I don't know what your problem is, but you need to back off. I'm not going to stand here and let you insult me or my service." The Karens didn't like that. They started to shout and insult me even more. I could feel my blood boiling, and I was ready to teach them a lesson, but then something unexpected happened. One of the bartenders came over and said, "Excuse me, ladies, but you need to leave. You're causing a disturbance, and we can't have that here." The Karens tried to argue, but the bartender wasn't having it. He told them to leave again, and this time they reluctantly complied. As they walked out of the bar, they continued to shout insults at me, but I didn't care. I was just glad they were gone. My friends and I finished our drinks, and left the bar soon after. As we walked down the street, my buddies were patting me on the back, telling me how I put those Karens in their place. But I didn't feel proud of what happened. I was embarrassed that I had let them get to me. I was embarrassed that I had lost my cool in front of my friends. As we walked, one of my buddies asked me, "Hey man, are you okay?" I shrugged and said, "Yeah, I'm fine. It's just frustrating when people don't understand what we do and the hell we go through." My friend nodded in understanding, and we continued walking in silence. As my friends and I were walking down the street, I couldn't help but feel relieved that the Karens were gone. But just as we were about to turn the corner, one of my friends noticed something. "Hey guys, look over there," he said, pointing to a group of men standing by a parked car. It didn't take long for us to realize that these were the boyfriends or partners of the Karens we had just encountered in the bar because, well, they were standing right next to them. They were glaring at us and muttering to each other. I could feel the tension rising, and I knew that this wasn't going to end well. We quickened our pace, hoping to avoid a confrontation. But as we got closer, the men stepped forward and blocked our path. "What's the matter, soldier boy? Can't handle a little bashing from a few women?" one of them sneered. I could feel the anger boiling inside of me, but I tried to keep my cool. "Look man, we don't want any trouble. We're just trying to have a good time. Let's just go our separate ways," I said, hoping to defuse the situation. But the men weren't having it. They started pushing us and taunting us, calling us names and spitting on the ground. We knew one of the bartenders had called the cops after the Karens left, suspecting that something like this might happen from the threats Karens were throwing around. So as we stood there, waiting for the police to arrive, the tension in the air was palpable. The Karens' boyfriends were getting more and more agitated by the minute, and it was clear that they were spoiling for a fight. Suddenly, one of them lunged forward and sucker punched one of my friends, and when I saw blood streaming down his face, I snapped. Without thinking, I charged forward at the guy who threw the punch and served him with a solid right hook. The punch connected with a sickening crunch, and the guy stumbled backwards, clutching his nose. We went sprawling to the ground after I went down on him, grappling with each other as we tried to gain the upper hand. I could hear my friends shouting in the background, and I knew that things were quickly spiraling out of control. But just as things were about to get even uglier, the sound of police sirens cut through the air. Within minutes, several police cars had pulled up, and a group of officers had jumped out and raced over to the scene. They quickly assessed the situation and managed to pull us apart. One of the officers helped my friend up and led him to safety, while the others started to handcuff the Karens' boyfriends. As they were being arrested, one of them started to yell and curse, claiming that we had started the fight. But the police didn't buy it. Two of them went and watched the whole thing unfold on the security camera footage, and they knew that we were just defending ourselves. After the Karens and their boyfriends were taken away, the police took our statements and advised us to press charges. My friend who had been punched decided to press charges, and the Karen's boyfriend who had thrown the punch was charged with assault. The rest of the night was a blur of flashing lights and shouting, as the police processed the scene and made their arrests. The guy who I had punched was taken to the hospital, where he was diagnosed with a broken nose. The whole experience was basically a painful reminder of just how dangerous these types of situations can be. They had instigated the entire thing, and yet they seemed to think that they were the victims. It was a classic case of entitled behavior, and it was a stark reminder of just how toxic our society can be at times. This story happened a few years ago while employed as a police officer in a small, rural 15-man department. Since being a cop, I've never had a strong desire to write tickets. Typically, my limit was 15 miles per hour over before I would even consider issuing a citation, and that might result in a 5 over ticket. 10 over and would get a warning. I tended to focus on impaired and or uninsured drivers. In the town was a lone stretch of roadway, couple of miles, leading straight to the nearest interstate. Using this road might take a few men off your commute to home work, depending on the time of day. The road had a couple of very old homes which had a comfortable distance from the roadway. Speed limit was 55, but not uncommon to see drivers going 15 over. We rarely got complaints. Unfortunately, one summer, we had an auto-pedestrian fatal accident. A driver was on their way to work in the early hours and hit a small child who wasn't supervised by their crappy parents. Speeding wasn't a factor in the tragedy. Following the tragedy, an order was given that we needed to seriously enforce speeding in the area. The next following weeks I stop anyone going over the speed limit, even 1 mile per hour over. Now, I still keep to my normal method of issuing tickets, meaning your speed needs to be excessive to get a ticket. Most of these stops consisted of me informing them of the tragedy and the importance of all of us driving more slowly. Most drivers are understanding and see what I'm trying to do, except a few who file complaints for stopping cars for 1 mile per hour and inconveniencing them. I get told to tone back on my proactive enforcement and just be more visible. Great. Instead of looking for bigger issues or interacting with the community, they want me to just sit in my car. So for the next couple of nights I park directly in front of City Hall, with my steady burns on, when your lights are on but don't flash, for hours at a time. I make zero attempt at being a productive officer, and being a vigilant and dedicated employee. I even take photographs to send to my supervisor to let him know I'm being visible. Needless to say, I get talked to about my attitude and told to go back to being normal. Side note, my sergeant later resigned shortly after I did, after some super shady crap happened in the department. Before he left, he gave me an award for the most literal officer ever. I still have it. Super side note, I have another short story about malicious compliance when I was told to ticket people for long weeds in people yards. Same town, same department. We had an order from the chief stating that the mayor was concerned with long weeds in people's yards that presented a fire hazard. So the order comes out that the small town will be divided into quadrants, and each officer is responsible for ticketing people in their grid. Now there were multiple issues there. Firstly, the city had very few sidewalks. This meant there was usually a stretch of ground from most people's fence to the road which was just gravel or, in most cases, weeds. Did that land belong to the homeowner? The city? Who knows? No one would ever answer the damn question for me. Secondly, our city had multiple pieces of land and property. Most of them suffered from the issues I just mentioned. Well, 9 out of 10 properties weren't in compliance either. In fact, we had multiple brush fires started during the summer, and all but one occurred on city land. The hypocrisy was not lost on me, so I refused to enforce the long weeds. Well, a couple weeks go by, and we have an echo, term for a deceased body. A middle-aged guy, down on life, ends it with a hunting rifle in a parking lot. My partner, a new officer with a few months on the job, is the primary for the investigation. As I try to help guide him, the mayor comes to our crime scene. He tells the chief about a house with really long weeds he saw on the way over. Chief sees me, and must have been aware I was lacking in weed enforcement, ordered me to go with the mayor. Well, the homeowner isn't home, so I tell the mayor I will investigate the matter. I ended up reviewing the city code enforcement. There was some clause about allowing time for a homeowner to be in compliance after notification. It also had a clause about the length that the homeowner had to be in non-compliance before being notified. Well, I had no idea how long their weeds hadn't been in compliance, so I first had to document the length of their weeds. Then I would have to follow up at a later point to ensure they had been non-compliant, at which point I would then notify them they had X amount of days to comply. Then I would follow up at that time. As you can imagine, this is really freaking stupid. However, we had a rule that any case that couldn't be closed by the end of the shift needed to go to investigations. The light bulb turns on. I then spend days driving through my grid, pulling cases for every single house. I take multiple photographs of each property which I upload into each case. I even measure the weeds. I vigorously attach all the license plates and/or homeowner info. I type a long report narrative and copy-paste it to each separate case. I also document any of the city's properties that are non-compliant in my report, so that homeowners will see it if they decide to get a copy of the report. I then send dozens of cases to our investigations division for them to follow up, since I can't handle it in one shift. I never heard a single peep about long weeds after that. Side note, I checked my wireless network in my cop car to Weeds Enforcement Officer. Anyone who looked at Wi-Fi networks when I was around would see it. It stayed that way till I finally quit and went to a decent department. So, this happened a little over a few years ago when I worked for one of the UK's top retailers. Our store had not long implemented the home delivery service. and being a new feature to our store, there were obviously teething problems with the system, but our team always managed to give it their all, and only minimal mistakes slipped through the cracks. Fast forward a few months later, and our delivery system had now been fully established, and 99% of the mistakes came from customer errors ranging from selecting the wrong date to placing the order for pickup instead of home delivery. You name the mistake. We were the ones blamed for their incompetence. I wasn't a supervisor for this role, but my duties required me to make supervisory decisions wherever I didn't require manager's approval and deal with customer queries. One day, I got a call from one of my drivers who informed me that the customer's property was now closed up and looked as though it had been abandoned for weeks. I looked at the delivery address on the system and noticed that the postcode, US's zip code, didn't match with the address. Googled the postcode and found that the customer had changed only his street name when updating his details, and neglected to change their postcode, in which the driver's GPS system relied on for ensuring that the driver went to the right place. The new address is 30 miles in the opposite direction to my driver's route, and just a couple of miles outside of our catchment area, a specific border between other stores that offered delivery. Due to the company's policy, the driver was only and legally required to wait 15 minutes for a customer no-show, as they are warned in plenty of time to ensure that there is someone present to receive the items. Knowing this, I ask him to bring the items back when he is in the area, and I would put them on the next delivery vehicle going out, as his second drop was reasonably close to the new address. This meant that the customer would still get their shopping that day, but it meant that it was going to be a little later than expected. As I was gathering the required documents to initialize the changeover to delivery vehicle, and noting the extra discrepancy in miles and time, the phone rings. Hi, blah blah, how can I help? Hey, this is X from customer service. I have a customer on the line asking about his delivery. It's Ken, the lovely customer who forgot to change his postcode. Hi, sure, place him on. Now, it's at this point in time where I should note that our delivery store always endeavored to give the store phone number to customers for direct contact, and to help save the customer a hefty phone bill, as the customer service number is charged at 75 pence per minute, around $1.06. Standard rates for local numbers were considerably lower at 15 pence per minute, around 21 cents or free depending on the network provider and plan. Ken: Hi, I've been waiting on my delivery and haven't received it yet, and it's now over 10 minutes from the delivery slot. Can you find out what's happening, please? Yes, he really did say 10 minutes, which is still reasonably acceptable given driving conditions, weather, etc. Me: Hello sir, I was just on my way to call you. Don't give me that. I know nonsense when I see it. Where's my delivery? Oh great. Sir, as I'm trying to explain to you, there has been a mix-up with your address. What? Don't you dare say that to me. I want my delivery. How old are you? Me: As I was trying to explain, there has been a mix-up with your address. When you changed your address, you've forgotten to change your postcode, which has? I didn't forget to change anything. You must have done something wrong. I can assure you, sir, it was nothing I did. Sure, I hacked into the company's records to change your new postcode to your old postcode just to screw with you. I'm sorry for any inconvenience, but at this moment in time, my driver is on the last of his deliveries and is on his way back to the store to hand over. I'm about to say, hand over your goods to another driver, so it can be delivered a little later tonight, and that, if he wouldn't mind waiting until then, you will just get on the phone with your driver and order him to turn around. I'm sorry, sir, I can't do that, as he needs to adhere to the allotted delivery route and time, or risk running a service investigation. This is why they were late for the rest of their route, which could ultimately result in the driver not being able to deliver in the future. Thankfully, this did change later on, to give drivers an hour leeway after a strew of customer and driver complaints. I start saying, I am willing, before he cut me off. What? Are you serious? I own a delivery company myself, and if any of my drivers pulled that stunt, they wouldn't be working for me. Knowing I wasn't getting anywhere with him, I decided to let him rant. I placed the phone on speaker and got on with the rest of my job, having already decided to cancel his order. While the customer is ranting and shouting on the phone, I have cleaned the area up, swept it, cleaned up any spills, took out the trash, stacked the crates, and laid the area out for the next morning to make it easier for the team's workers. Once I've done this, a manager from another department has come to see what all the noise was, so I nod off the phone and he starts to listen in. 2 minutes later, he moves, looks at me, and proceeds to say, "What a jerk." He moves away, and finally this epic rant has come to an end. Or so I thought. "Ken, hello, are you still there?" I quickly answered. "Yes, I'm here." By this point, I looked at the clock, and it had been a whole 45 minutes, on top of the 10 minutes from the start of our conversation, and the average 20 minutes wait time from the call center. Subtotal of the call: £56.25, which is $79.50. This is relevant. Ken: well, me. As I've previously stated, I won't be able to send the driver back. By this point he had returned to the store, but I would happily. Too late. He goes into a rant again for a further 30 minutes. During this time, I leave him to rant off speakerphone and go to the toilet. Then I went for a cigarette. Then I had a soda, and oh, I think I'll have a packet of chips, hoping that he'd finished his rant and hung up. Subtotal of the call: £78.75, which is $111.30. Still relevant. Boy, oh boy, was I wrong. As I picked up the receiver, the customer finished a sentence and asked what I was going to do about his delivery. And I say, "Unfortunately, sir, there's nothing that I can do. All I can do now is direct you back to our customer service to file a complaint, and hopefully you can get it sorted, as I am not authorized to re-deliver your goods. Don't bother. Cancel my order, and I won't be using your services again." With the least condescending manner I can muster, I tell him, "I'm sorry you feel that way, sir. Please accept my apologies and have a nice day." Click. I quickly rang the store manager and let her know what had happened, just in case he decided to file a complaint. Store manager burst out laughing and said, "I'll deal with it." I never heard any more about it, and never received any more orders from him. Why was the total price of the call relevant? He spent all that time ranting, raving, and not letting me speak, racking up a final phone bill of around £82.50, which is $116.60. His total delivery order: £25, which is $33.30. The minimum requirement for a delivery order. When I realized what he had done, I was in hysterics. Being a rude, bordering on abusive customer and expecting me to sit and listen to him like a scalded little schoolboy wasn't exactly a fortune, since he had his own delivery company, but it still sounded like sweet karma. Would love to have seen his face when he received his bill. So I think this falls into this category, but it all started with me purchasing a lawn mower at a big box hardware store. In the interest of keeping them anonymous, let's just call them Rob Lowe, or Lowe's for short. I walked in one day looking to finally purchase a new mower, and I was in luck, as they had a smoking deal on a display model. Unprepared to be going home with a new mower that day, I didn't bring my truck, so I simply asked if I could set it aside and come back in a little bit with my truck. I returned maybe 30 minutes later and picked up my mower and headed home. This should be the end of the story, but weirdly it isn't. Fast forward about 2 weeks later, and I get a call from Lowe's informing me that my mower is ready for pickup. Confused, I replied, "Pardon me." So they reminded me that I ordered a mower about 2 weeks ago, and it just arrived and is awaiting pickup. Now I know most would have seized the opportunity right there, but I decided to be a good person, and I explained to the employee that no, I didn't order a mower. I bought a floor model and set it aside to pick up later, which I did. The employee thanks me, apologizes for the confusion, and says he'll update the order. Welp, 1 week later they call again. Same thing, and I once again explain why it's not mine. They did this once a week for 3 weeks straight, and after the third time I tell the wife I swear if they call me again, I'm going to pick up my mower. At this point now I'm just excited. I'm watching my phone hoping they'll call, because in my mind I've earned it at this point and I want my free mower. Well, lo and behold, week 4 hits and guess who calls? I am now ready to accept my free mower, but I'm also unsure how this is going to play out. I don't know if it's paid for. I don't have a receipt. It seems like a long shot. So I simply tell the employee I'm so sorry I haven't been in yet to get it. But I got called out of town for work and just got back, and with that said I have no idea where I put the receipt. The employee kindly replies, "Oh, no worries, it's paid in full. So all you need is a photo ID matching the name on the order." Perfect. I call the wife to let her know I'm picking up our new mower. She just laughs, still positive that once I get there, they won't have a mower to give me. But you'll be happy to know I pull in, tell customer service I'm here for my mower, show them my ID, and next thing you know some guy on a tow motor is loading a brand new in-the-box, unassembled mower into the back of my truck, and off I go. Still have that mower today. I thought about returning the original afterwards, but I just got nervous it would somehow raise the alarms. Then I was going to sell it on the marketplace, but shortly after all this, I had bought a new house, and my best friend put in a lot of hours helping me move, and he too had been looking for a new mower, so I just gave it to him instead as a thanks for helping me. I still ended up with a brand new mower for essentially 60% off, and then was also able to pay for movers with the original one, so it was still a win-win. I genuinely tried telling them it wasn't my mower, but they insisted it was, and it would be rude to refuse their offer. My parents had me when they were quite young. They were no longer teenagers but had barely left that age bracket. My mom and dad met in college, which is also when they had me. So while my parents were attending their courses, I mostly stayed with my grandparents. The whole family lives in the same area and the college was not far away. My parents were still young and liked to go out with friends on occasion. When the following happened, I was a few years old. Occasionally, they frequented a bar. One night, a drunk guy there groped my mom and did not take no for an answer. My dad intervened and stopped the guy. Half an hour later, all seemed forgotten. The music was loud, the bar crowded, and then someone in the crowd hit my dad with an empty glass pitcher square in the face. He was bleeding profusely and collapsed. But in the press, semi-darkness, and over the music, no one knew who did it. My dad was taken to the hospital. He had a broken nose and a severe concussion. He also couldn't see who had attacked him, and his memory was fuzzy between the alcohol and being hit in the head. Of course, they considered the guy who had harassed my mom, but they didn't know him, nor did they see him anywhere leading up to the moment, let alone have any evidence. So they pressed charges against an unknown assailant, but there was virtually nothing anyone could do. A few days later, the man who had harassed my mom approached her on campus. It turns out he was attending the same college as my parents. He made a few veiled comments, leaving little doubt that he had been the one who hit my dad in the face. He also let my mom know that my dad should mind his manners next time. He claimed that the little touching he had done didn't hurt anyone, and wasn't that bad. He even suggested he might do it again, and maybe more. Then he went on his way. My mom was horrified, of course. She went home and told my grandparents, my dad, and his parents. But no one could do anything. It was a he said, she said situation after all. And my mom hadn't even gotten the guy's name. My mom cried a lot at that time and didn't know what to do. She was also afraid of going to classes or out alone. I only remember that time vaguely. I was just a little kid, but I can remember my dad in the hospital with his broken nose, and my mom crying a lot. My dad, of course, was just as angry and humiliated as my mom. No one knew what to do, and everyone was treading on eggshells around each other. But that is where my uncle enters the stage. My uncle, my mom's brother, lived on the other side of the country. He was a private investigator. He was, of course, the last to hear the full story. But the moment he heard someone had threatened his little sister, he was on his way home. After hearing the full story, my uncle knew it would likely be hard to get the guy on the harassment, the assault, or the threats due to the lack of evidence. My uncle had my mom point the guy out from afar on campus. It took a few days to find him. But then my uncle started to stalk that piece of human filth. My uncle took sick days, all his vacation, and invested every second possible to find out everything about the harasser. My uncle even approached the man in another bar and became drinking buddies with him. Over several weeks, my uncle uncovered all manners of illicit behavior: possession, consumption, and distribution of illegal substances, theft, and a few other misdemeanors and small-time crimes. My uncle could have put him away for that, but my uncle always said that if he sent the guy to prison, it would be for molesting my mom and hurting my dad. And that is what he did. One night, while out with his new buddy drinking, my uncle made the guy intoxicated, and they ended up in my uncle's motel room. He got the harasser to incriminate himself on video, rattling off a list of illegal activities he was involved in. My uncle, of course, pretended to be a crook too. Among the stories, the man told was the story of how he groped some chick and brained her dude with a pitcher of beer. Now, something needs to be said. In my country, recording someone in secret is illegal, and under some conditions, like if the police do it, it is not permissible as evidence in court. But as a private investigator, my uncle knew those laws exactly. Paradoxically, the situation is different if it is not only audio but also video. And my uncle had the man on camera confessing. The next day, my uncle turned himself into the police with all his collected evidence because secretly filming people was still a crime. Though the video could be used as evidence in court, my uncle was not affiliated with the police or any other governmental agency. When the criminal trial and the civil trial were over, the man got 6 years in prison and had to pay damages to my mom and dad. My uncle got slapped with the equivalent of a $2,000 fine for secretly filming the man. Money well spent, he always said. Thank you for joining us. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more captivating stories. Share your own experiences and opinions in the comments below, and let's keep the conversation going. Until next time, stay tuned for more epic tales.